Jordan, you're questioning it, asking how does the US government help Intel fix its leading edge node when it's not a money issue? They have no customers, and there is a good reason for that. Jordan, extrapolate on that.
Yeah, I mean, Intel, in my opinion, has two main issues. One is on the technology side, where their leading edge foundry business has struggled to execute at these more advanced nodes, and they've lost a lot of potential business and share to TSM, who's executed flawlessly. And the second big issue is, and this is kind of the chicken and the egg, is that they don't have any external non-Intel customers to move, volume and business into these fabs on this new leading edge. So you kind of need the former, meaning you need to be a leader and prove to customers you can execute at these advanced nodes for these, AI and leading edge chips. And then secondly, then you need to win the business. And until they get both of those, I think they're going to continue to struggle. And
Lip-Bu Tan really said that, articulated it in the earnings, saying we are not going to have this build it and they will come mentality. They've got to say that they're coming before we build it. And the 14A leading cutting edge nodes, for example, Jordan, is government control or a smaller equity stake going to secure that demand?
Well, on the surface, it's not, because the customers are going to ultimately decide, is Intel a company I can depend and count on for my most advanced, products that I have to get to the market? Why would I leave TSM, who's proven to me year after year that they can execute on the plan? I think the goal here is that Trump puts some money in or gets the government to invest and then uses that to get Intel to accelerate the process of building out these new fabs in Ohio. And then he can go to these customers like Broadcom, Qualcomm, Apple, and NVIDIA and say, oh, now they have the capability and you need to move more of your orders and production to a domestic leading, edge company like Intel.
Jordan, I really want the desk analysts' take and experience. We broke the story yesterday about the stake. We broke the story this morning about using CHIPS Act funds. What was the buy side saying to you about how they interpreted that news?
Yeah, that's kind of the key question. And I think it's I haven't heard a ton of questions as to, okay, what next? Does this mean I go out and buy Intel? Ultimately, if you look at semiconductors that have led much of the market this year, I think Intel has been the laggard due to their weak fundamentals. And a lot of people who need shorts to offset longs like NVIDIA, Broadcom, TSM have used Intel as that short. Now, today, the news about a stake and what this could mean, I think, gets people nervous. Maybe Intel's going to go on a run. I should cover my short. But outside of that, I do not hear, big mutual funds, the traditional guys who would come in, take a big stake and think this company is going to turn it around, acting on this and these headlines. One, because it's premature, but two, I think they're coming to the same conclusion that I just talked about, is that how does government money or an equity stake, really bring them the customers or fix their internal technology problems? And that's unknown.
Jensen Huang and NVIDIA have demonstrated that proximity to the president has allowed them to move faster. I'm thinking principally actually about exports to the Gulf. A good relationship between the president and Lip-Bu Tan. Is there an unlock for Intel in that?
Well, I don't know what the, I think ultimately here's the way I see it, is that I don't think Trump likes the fact that the, largest, oldest and most established kind of U.S. foundry logic company in Intel is on its heels, struggling, losing share to these foreign players in Asia like TSM. I think it's a bad look. Obviously, he wants the U.S., to be great again, and that, so much depends on semiconductors. So I think the fact that they're firing people, reducing costs, struggling is just a bad look under his watch. And all this CHIPS Act money was allocated, and they got the most of it. So I think basically he's saying, I want some return for this. And, I want to try to help this, semiconductor business domestically improve, and that's got to start with you somehow. So I think he's just putting pressure on them. And I don't know what other alternative Intel has. They can't really push back. And ultimately, they'll probably take what money the government wants to invest and try to strengthen the relationship going forward.
Jordan, what's so interesting is then we heard on Air Force One, and we're going to discuss it more in the show later, a potential threat of 200 to 300% tariffs on semiconductors coming into the US. But there are huge carve-outs, so we understand being written here, that if you're investing a lot in America, you don't face that. So that seems that TSMC and Samsung that are building in America aren't affected. Is he going to allow these big Asian chip giants to continue to build in America and get these sorts of carve-outs?
I don't know what other alternative they really have. I mean, the U.S. and the government and the administration is kind of in a tough spot here. They need to project, like, a strategy of trying to get, more domestic U.S. semiconductor capacity. But if you get too tough and put too high of a tariff, that really puts the U.S. consumer and our strategic technology, whether it's defense or AI, at a major disadvantage. And the reason that is because the U.S. doesn't have an alternative. It's not like, we can just shift to all this domestic capacity. It's going to take a lot of time and money to basically get that. And right now, that's basically TSM and a lot of Samsung and some of Intel. So I think that's why they get the carve-outs, is to buy time. And then ultimately, that time runs out, and then Trump's going to say, well, if we have the capacity here and Intel is, on a better footing and track, then we want you to push those orders and that money towards Intel and away from TSM and Samsung. And that's where he could start to then use the tariffs to basically push that business towards Intel.